Everybody. Welcome to the TriMet board meeting for Wednesday to May 25th, 2016. Before we get into our regular business meeting, this is the time for our public forum on all matters, including resolutions, an opportunity for public to testify and provide input to the board between now and essentially 9:45. We're starting a little late, so we give a little more time if need be. Individuals are asked to limit their comments to 3 minutes, and if individuals wish to share additional information, they may complete a comment card that will be provided to the board and become part of our record. Also, if you have more testimony, I see that one person has given us some written testimony that's in front of us, so you're always welcome to do that. We'll try to direct your concerns or issues to the appropriate staff, and if it's not something under TriMet's jurisdiction, we'll have the staff help you get to the right person that can help you. Today, actually, I believe we have 5 people signed up, and I'm going to call you up a couple at a time, if I could. And I'll apologize for pronunciation of names at this moment, but first off is R.A. Fontes, I believe, and Nicole Phillips. Morning.
Morning, Mr. President. R.A. Fonts, Lake Oswego. Thank you. One, low-income fares are overdue. Suggested funding, shut down WES, stop subsidizing fire sale streetcar fares, and raise H-fare passes to 50% of full fare passes. These should make available around $20 million. 2, regarding Mr. Barney Bottomley's comments on April 27th Oregonian op-ed. The fact that trips per mile metric, highlighted in orange on your handout, is unofficial is irrelevant. The values are correct and used solely to show that Metro's optimistic ridership projection is directly related to its extraordinary low cost per ride forecast, highlighted in green. It's an official metric. Removing those orange highlighted sections would not in any way affect the validity of the op-ed's conclusions. The bulk of Mr. Bottomley's initial comments, highlighted in red, are false. The op-ed does not say or imply anything suggesting that short projects are inherently more productive than long ones. In fact, that riders per mile metric was used to eliminate any length-based bias in comparing max lines. By the way, the longest line, the blue, is also the most productive. The simple truth is that the only straw man here is the one Mr. Bottomley conjured up. The fact that Mr. Bottomley fixated on an insignificant side issue while ignoring main arguments speaks volumes. The op-ed stands. There's no argument at all with Mr. Bottomley's comments regarding self-driving cars. The only concern is that they ended without mentioning the things that TriMet is doing to prepare itself for the rapidly approaching AV revolution. From the outside, TriMet's efforts in this area appear to be non-existent. Max fails its financial promise. After billions in capital costs, it is not cheaper to operate than BRT. Even some regular buses are cost competitive with Max, yet they lack light rail's operational advantages. Long-promised bus service improvements keep getting pushed back while we get stuck with over-the-top West and Orange Line boondoggles. And over the last 40 years, per capita TriMet taxes, adjusted for inflation, have risen more than twice as much as fast, as per capita riderships. Things are about to change. Consider 3 ultra-high probability autonomous vehicle developments. 1, they are coming. 2, many riders, but not all, will shift from subsidized transit to faster, cheaper, safer, and far more convenient unsubsidized AVs. 3, buses will become cheaper to operate relative to rail. The point is that with its 2-car, 372 passenger limit, light rail no longer makes sense in Portland. If TriMet is to survive in a world where every $1 million actually count, we'll have to walk away from high fixed cost rail. Thank you.
Thank you for your comments, Mr. Fonts. Appreciate it. And thank you for the information. Good morning.
Good morning. My name is Nicole Phillips. I'm a member of the steering committee of Bus Riders Unite and their representative on the Opal Board of Directors. I'm a member also of TriMet's Transit Equity Access Committee, and I'm a transit dependent rider. Recently, Bus Riders Unite announced that we would be actively pursuing a low-income fare. This has, of course, always been on our to-do list. However, logistic and financial burdens created by the new electronic fare system, combined with the current housing crisis, which is displacing people and drastically reducing their available income, makes a low-income fare an absolute priority. Without it, we are disrupting transit-dependent riders' ability to remain productive and self-sufficient. I was pleasantly surprised when TriMet announced that you too would be investigating a low-income fare. Of course, it feels good to be on the same page with you on the beginning of an issue. But this also indicates that you understand the importance of easy access to public transit for those of us who are transit dependent. Speaking for the constituents of BRU, I appreciate your taking this first major step. We look forward to working with you in developing and implementing a low-income fare. The other issue that BRU is advocating for is a multi-rider or family option for e-fare. One card per person is a simple solution, but the simplest solution is not always the most ideal. The cost of loading multiple cards, monitoring the balances of multiple cards, juggling multiple cards when you're also traveling with children. These are just some of the ways a one card per person policy adds an additional burden to transit-dependent families. As currently designed, the new e-fare system doesn't allow for multi-rider cards, but that doesn't necessarily have to be engraved in stone. We ask that the board encourage TriMet staff to investigate options for removing a burden that could potentially stop families from switching to e-fare. There are a myriad of options and many new challenges that come from changing how we do something as simple as pay our fare. As TriMet moves forward with its electronic fare system, there are many opportunities to use technology to not only improve service, but to also find new and better ways to increase equity. Bus Riders Unite is committed to partnering with TriMet to ensure no one is excluded, and that on our world-class transit system, fare remains fair. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicole. We look forward to engaging with you as we learn more about the options.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so I'm going to butcher a couple names here, I think, and I'm going to apologize. Araceli Bercel and Zoneri Tuz. I bet you I'm nowhere close on these. Good, at least they know who they are. That's the important thing. I see three up here. Is the other one Olga Tunei Zakari? Is it okay?
Translator.
Oh, okay, very good, thank you.
Okay. Buenos días.
Ah, good, yeah. Yes, all right, great. Please, I'm sorry.
No.
Proceed.
Thank you. Yes.
Please.
Buenos días, mi nombre es Araceli. Quiero darle las gracias por permitirme expresar mi preocupación sobre las tarjetas que manejaría cada miembro de mi familia. Yo soy una ama de casa y el uso de bus de 3 a 4 días a la semana para ir a la clínica de mis hijos. También voy a la escuela 2 veces por semana. Mi esposo lo usa 5 días a la semana y es el único que trabaja. Pero cuando queremos salir en familia, tenemos que pagar cada uno y es muy caro y bastante. Ahora más pagando una tarjeta extra para cada uno. Eso es caro y complicado. Les pido por favor que consideren una tarjeta familiar y así sería más fácil y económico para una familia de bajos ingresos como nosotros y hay muchas más familias. Gracias por considerar esta petición y por favor consideren esta petición. Gracias.
Good morning. My name is Araceli, and I want to give you thanks for permitting me to express some of my concerns over the new e-fare cards. I am the one that manages the fares for each member of my family. I'm also a stay-at-home mom, and I use the bus 3 times a day, 3 times a week and go to clinics for for my children, and I also go to school 2 times a week. So, so I use the bus like around 5 times a week. My husband is the person who works in the family. He uses it every day. But when we want to go out as a family, we have to pay for each fare. Now, if we were to manage multiple cards, this would be very difficult thing to do. Managing each card and the fares that go with it, it becomes complicated. So I ask you today to please consider having a multi-rider card or a family card, which would facilitate using the new system. And it would be much more economically feasible for our family, who is a low-income family. So once again, I thank you for taking into consideration this petition, and please take into consideration these thoughts. Thank you.
Thank you.
Muy buenos días, mi nombre es Suemi, soy una madre de 3 hijos, vivo en el vecindario de Culi. Nosotros dependemos del servicio de transporte público y para ir a comprar y citas, para ir con el doctor, andando, mi esposo es un jornalero y depende de su ingreso para momentos cuando hay un poco de trabajo. Le quiero agradecer a TriMet por mandar a hacer un estudio para una tarifa de bajos recursos. Una tarifa de bajos recursos ayuda a personas como yo en mi comunidad, pero nos dé la oportunidad de trabajar juntos en la implementaciones de este programa. Entiendo que TriMet quiere facilitar la manera como colectar las tarifas, pero estos nuevos sistemas será más difícil para una familia como yo. Manejar 5 tarjetas para pagar el pasaje. Si ustedes fueran a la tienda a comprar comida para su familia, ustedes no pagarían por la comida tarjetas múltiples. Yo les pido a la mesa directiva que por favor dirijan la agencia en búsqueda de una manera de implementar una tarjeta familiar o una manera para pagar para varios pasajeros. Gracias por su tiempo y por pasar un buen día.
Good morning. My name is Soemi, and I am a mother of 3. I live in the Coley neighborhood. We depend on the public transportation system to go shopping, go to doctor visits, and to go to run errands. My husband is a day laborer, and we depend on his income, but there are times when there's very little work. So I would like to thank TriMet for doing a study on a low-income fare, because this is something that would actually help people like myself and other people in my community. I hope that we are also given the opportunity to work together to implement this new program. I understand that TriMet would like to facilitate the collection of fares, but this system would make it very difficult for families to use. How do you expect people like myself to manage 5 cards to pay for bus fares? If you were to go grocery shopping for your families, you wouldn't pay. You wouldn't be using 5 different cards to pay for the food. So I asked you, as the board of directors, to please direct the agency to look for a way to pay or to implement a family card or a way to pay for a number of bus fares. Thank you for your time, and I hope you have a good day.
Thank you. All right, then the last one we have signed up is Olga Tunayakani. Okay.
Muy buenos días. Mi nombre es Olga Tunay y yo soy madre de familia de 2 niñas.
Good morning. My name is Olga Tunay, and I am a mother of 2.
Mi principal preocupación ahorita acerca de las tarjetas que quiere implementar TriMet es que yo tendría que manejar 3 tarjetas.
My concern over the implementation of the new system is that I would have to manage 3 cards.
Y la primera vez que yo usaría la tarjeta tendría que pagar un costo de $24.
And for the initial use of these cards, I would have to pay a sum of $24.
Y en mi familia nomás mi esposo también trabaja y yo no trabajo, yo soy ama de casa.
And in my family, only my husband works. I'm a stay-at-home mom.
Entonces a mí me gustaría que TriMet tome muy en cuenta nuestras opiniones y nuestras necesidades como comunidad latina.
So I hope that the board, the TriMet board, takes into consideration these concerns, especially these concerns that come from the Latino community.
Porque para nosotros sería muy difícil también manejar las tarjetas, porque yo con mi familia tendríamos que manejar 3 tarjetas.
Because it would be actually very difficult to manage multiple cards. My family's is just an example of just managing 3 cards.
Entonces para mí sería mejor manejar una tarjeta familiar, porque cuando yo usaría el bus, porque yo uso el bus frecuentemente para llevar a mis niños a la escuela, para ir a mis citas, para ir a comprar, para cualquier cosa, yo únicamente cuento con el transporte público.
Like in my family, we only use public transportation, and we depend on it for everything: to go shopping, to go to doctor appointments, to go to drop the kids off at school. We don't have any other way of getting around town. We only use public transportation.
Entonces a mí me gustaría pues que tomara muy en cuenta para que nosotros tuviéramos un pase familiar nomás.
So if you could please take these into consideration, it'd be very beneficial for us to have a family card.
Muchas gracias por tomarnos en cuenta y por escuchar nuestras opiniones.
Thank you for listening to or giving us time to present our concerns and listening to our concerns.
Feliz día.
Have a good day.
Gracias. Thank you very much. Thank you for interpreting for us, too. Appreciate it. All right, that's all that I have signed up for the public forum this morning. Is there anybody else we've missed? All right, thank you. Well, with that, we'll conclude the public forum, and I will call our regular business meeting of May 25th, 2016 to order. And before we actually get into the formal agenda, I want to just take a moment and observe a moment of silence for Bill Wimmer, who was a TriMet retiree. I understand he just passed away. And I think as those of you who attended our meetings know that Bill is somebody who passionately represented the TriMet retirees before the board on many, many issues. He will be missed, as will all of the other TriMet retirees who've passed this year. So let's take a moment of silence for Bill and all those others. Thank you. All right, with that, I'm going to go into the board reports. The first board report is a Committee on Accessible Transportation, or as we call it, CAT. Director Baumann?
Yes, thank you. The CAT committee met last week on May 18th, and I have just a short report. At the business meeting, the chair of the committee and the nominating committee facilitator, Jan Campbell, presented recommendations for appointment to new members to the committee for terms beginning July 1st of this year. And the CAT passed a motion to approve the recommendation, and the recommendation will be forwarded to the general manager for consideration for appointment. Next, there was a report from Lieutenant Rachel Andrew and Lieutenant Eric Schober of the Transit Police regarding an update on transit police activity, and they responded to CAT's questions. Carrie Ayers Pelanuk, manager of service planning, reviewed the service improvements for fiscal year 17. Young Park, the manager of in-street projects, provided an overview of the bus stop improvement program, and he reviewed the plans for future bus stop improvements. And finally, Susan Florentino provided a quarterly update on lift operations performance. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions for Director Bauman? All right, seeing none, then let's move on to the Transit Equity Advisory Committee, or as we call it, TEAC. Director Bethel?
Thank you, Mr. President. TEAC met last Thursday, spent a little time debriefing the Portland mayoral candidates visit that occurred at the last meeting and discussed some other potential outreach opportunities that could arise. They also, Diversity and Transit Equity Department staff provided updates on the upcoming Title VI and Fair Enforcement community meetings that will be occurring in that process. Those meetings will begin next week and will conclude in late June. There was also some time allowed for subcommittees to break out to allow the TEAC members to work across a variety of TEAC project areas during that time. That concludes our brief report for TEAC for this month. We'll be glad to take any questions.
Do I see any?
Thank you.
No, thank you very much, Director. Well, let's move on then to the Metro Policy Advisory Committee, or as we know it, MPAC. Director Prosser?
And I do
for
not have
your attendance and willing to participate.
Yeah. I actually do not have a report because I was ill the last meeting and missed it, so.
Well, that's easy. All right.
So, do you have any questions?
Should we pepper him with questions just for the heck of it? Okay, good. Well, you know, not on the agenda is something I wanted to say as the president of the TriMet board. For those of you who do not know it, today is board member Shelley Martin's last meeting here with the TriMet Board of Directors. You don't need to smile so much. We're sad. We're very saddened that you're leaving. Well, I've only been on the board for a year. It does feel like longer because you've contributed in a very positive way. You've brought a lot to the board. You have much insight on human and labor relations, and we're very grateful for your input and advice on those issues that come for us. And I know you're also a big believer in good customer service and the need for a diverse and well-trained workforce, and because you know, it all adds up to bringing customers back, and I think you've been vocal in terms of expressing that to us on a regular basis. And you've also held a keen understanding of our business, the products that we deliver, and the many complexities. And we want to thank you for learning that and participating fully during your time here as a board member. I want to thank you for your service to this board and to the people of the Tri-County Metropolitan Transportation District of Oregon. Those of you who want to know what's going on, she actually moved, darn it, and we all took up a collection to see if we could buy her a new house in the district, but she wanted to go where she wanted to go. So, Director Martin, I want to say thank you again and wish you well, and maybe we'll see you back here again when you get into the right district.
There you go.
All right.
Thank you.
Is there anything you wanted to say to us?
This has been a fabulous experience and opening up the Orange Line and learning so much about everybody here and what they contribute. And TriMet staff, you're fantastic. For everything that every one of you do is just amazing. So I feel like I'm the lucky one to have been here, and I appreciate everything. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you. All right. With that concludes the board reports. I'm going to now turn over to the general manager for your reports.
Well, thank you, Mr. President, members of the board. Good morning. As usual, I like to start with a ridership report from the last month, which is April, and frankly, no dramatic change from the months that we've reported on more recently, which is we saw a very minor decrease in overall ridership April of last year to April of this year. but we did see some significant shifts within that ridership. Actually, one of the more stunning numbers I saw was 12.5% increase on MAX during peak hours. And of course, that's largely due to the Orange Line. We did see, as you'd expect, MAX overall increased about 9%. Bus went down about 6.4%. West was pretty flat, maybe just a tad down. So again, relatively flat overall ridership. And again, just to note, we track how that relates to gas prices. And if you look about a year ago, gas prices were about $2.80 on their way down. Right now, they're about $2.33 average in April. So just to note that has obviously an effect on ridership. And again, we'll continue to sort of keep a close eye on that. This will be, with your budget upcoming, the 5th year that we've really not done any general ridership, or excuse me, fare increase, recognizing kind of the competitive nature of pricing these days as well. So just to note that, and obviously any questions you have on specific riderships, we've got chapter and verse of detail if you'd like. The other thing that I just wanted to sort of make a bit of a big deal about was the work on First Avenue that occurred over the last 2 weeks. It actually ended on Saturday. While we had a lot of work going on and we had a lot of disruption of the system, it's actually one of the little busier sections of our overall light rail alignment, where both the blue, the red, and the green, blue and the red line operate on a regular basis amongst our heaviest lines. We were able to divert some of those trains to the mall. We were able to, I think, do a pretty good job of overall service. And I want to particularly offer my thanks to our customers who, frankly, put up with the interruption in a very positive spirit. Again, we know we're interfering with people's lives and their commutes as we do these things, but we do them because they're incredibly important to the overall safety and operations of the system. It was a very successful project, completed right on time, on schedule. So again, congratulations to the great staff that was involved in that. Pulling that off was no small task. We had literally thousands of hours of volunteer staff out as ride guides to help our customers make the connections they needed to make. So it was a very successful effort. I'd also just note that I think we've gotten a lot of kudos, not just for the operations plan that went into effect, but for the communication efforts that both led into that effort. So to the extent that many of our customers, as they were approached on the MAX with one more flyer, said, "I've seen it already, go away." So we may have over-communicated a little bit, but that was, quite frankly, quite intentional on the part of our staff. To sort of make sure people had no surprises. So again, I think really great effort on the part of Team TriMet. It was a lot of work. Just to note, we replaced switches on First Avenue near Morrison, replaced switches near Cooch, we replaced the curve rail on Skidmore Fountains. When the power was off, the overhead power, we actually improved some of the connections on the catenary system, and we replaced something called feeder breakers. I think Board Member Esmond may know what that is more than I do, at the Morrison substation. And we also improved the drainage along that whole section, and you might recall that was an issue last Halloween, and so again, improvements in that regard. So an awful lot of work was done when we took advantage of it with both our maintenance of way staff as well as our contracted staff. Again, the key message is thank you to our riders for their patience and cooperation as we went through this. And it was a good experience because we do have a couple other of these shutdowns planned in the next year. Beginning in late August, we actually have some switches to replace in the Rose Quarter area, and that will also require an interruption of service for a period of time as we do that work. And then later, actually about this time next year, we have at the 11th Avenue turnaround, again, some switches that need to be replaced. This is all incredibly important in terms of keeping our system in a state of good repair. And that's both a mandate from the federal government, but also something we deeply care about. I think we all want to leave our system in a better position than it was, frankly, than when we all found it. So that's our intention with all of this work. And again, thanks for the staff and again, our customers for their understanding as we went through this. Happy to answer any questions or any comments that you might have.
I have a couple comments. First off, from looking at it from the outside, I didn't actually make it downtown during the construction, but I concur. What you guys did was a monumental amount of work with very minimal disruption and unbelievable customer acceptance and convenience with what you did. I know it impacted a lot of folks, and people had to get on either walk or take buses to get around the construction. But what I saw was just a great planning, communication, planning, execution. It worked well. I was asking who had been involved, and it appears to me that almost every facet of this organization was involved in one way or another, whether it goes from the maintenance away folks to the operations and maintenance folks, both on the bus and the light rail, to our fare people, to you name it. I mean, everybody from creative services to IT to GIS, they all played a part in this. I could list them all, but I think I won't do that. I think we just need to thank the entire organization for stepping up. And what you've done is you've set a high bar for yourself for the next few projects. We know that sometimes when you get into these things, you run into stuff that isn't expected. But what this said to me is you had anticipated the issues that could create problems and did a good job of having contingencies to deal with those, because we didn't hear about any of those. So my hats are off to the staff and to all of the folks who participated. And my understanding is there was over 2,000 hours of actual volunteers out there directing folks to get to the right place. So again, thanks to everybody.
Yeah, thank you. Appreciate that very much. I had two other quick reports that I wanted to offer, and then meanwhile, Doug Kelsey can come up for the quarterly operations report. One is that yesterday we had the great honor of our Operator of the Year ceremonies, and again we choose a mini run Operator of the Year, a rail Operator of the Year, and then a full-time bus Operator of the Year. We'll have the opportunity to bring those award winners to the board hopefully next month. I think that's what we've got planned. And you'll have the chance to congratulate them. But I would just say that it was absolutely heartwarming and thrilling to be in the room with so much excellence in terms of both the nominees and the operators. We inducted at the same time, I believe it was 6 operators into the Million Mile Club, which is the sort of the highest honor of people actually serving this agency with stellar records of safety and performance over what is probably about a 29 to 30-year span to get to that million miles. Indeed, somebody noted, I think it was Doug, that a million miles is driving around the circumference of the Earth 40 times. So those are a lot of miles and a lot of excellence in that room that really, I think, made us all very proud to be part of TriMet, and we tried to share that with obviously everybody who was in that room. The second thing I wanted to note was that we are hosting right now the Community Transit Association of America conference here in Portland. About 1,000 of our friends and colleagues from around the country. Typically, the CTAA, as it is known, is really an organization of smaller transit providers, rural transit providers, services for seniors, those sort of small services. Ride Connection, actually Elaine Wells from Ride Connection was on the board of directors of that organization. I had the opportunity to offer the Welcome to the Rose City comments yesterday at the conference, and again, just wanted you to know that we've got a lot of extra riders who are actually taking advantage of the system here in the city today. A great organization that does a lot of really good work, including a lot of the sort of volunteer coordination that Ride Connection and other senior services provide, which I think is very important work nationally, and it's great to for them to get together and share the successes they have as an industry and best practices. So just to note that that's going on today and tomorrow again at the Oregon Convention Center. With that, I'd like to turn to Doug Kelsey, who's going to offer us our quarterly operations update.
Before
Oh, yeah.
Doug gets started, we've heard several comments in our public forum about the e-fare, the family card, and the cost of the card. Would you just take a few minutes and explain how we're addressing those issues? And, I really appreciate the people that came forward, and particularly, when you come, anybody who comes before a formal board in a formal setting like this, it's difficult, but particularly, for folks where English is your second language, I think it's probably more difficult. So I really do appreciate the three of you coming, and thank you for coming. If they need translation services, or Martine, I see you in the back there, maybe if Martine could help, so.
Very good. Thank you for that. And I would just note that as the board considered the ordinance associated with the electronic fare conversion, if you will, that will take place in the next year, over the next year, you authorized a staff to implement a number of mitigations to sort of make this transition easy, particularly for low-income riders. And that includes the distribution of I'm not going to remember the number, but 100,000 or so free cards associated with the program, particularly focused on low-income families and individuals, so that we can minimize that upfront cost associated. Indeed, the system is built around individual cards, and of course the reason for that was that we wanted to offer the discount of day passes and buying an actual monthly pass a day at a time, if you will, $5 at a time, rather than the $100 monthly pass all at once for the adult pass. There is a bit of a conflict. You've got an individual card that creates an individual account that has individual benefits that accrue to that account. And so one of the things we'll be doing is looking at, is there another way to begin to look at this? We will put some energy into that, but I must note that the first thing we want to do is have a very successful launch in the most equitable way of the technology that we're launching. And we know that's a daunting task all by itself before we, frankly, try something new that nobody else has ever tried. We're almost doing that now, frankly, with the fare capping. So I think that fundamentally answered your question. I would also just note, per Ms. Phillips, Nicole Phillips' comment, that we have hired a firm to do some economic analysis related to low-income fare. That's really just characterizing, how many people, what would the cost would be, how many people at various thresholds of income, so that we have a little bit of a database associated with that. And that work will be ongoing, but we actually expect the first results from that sometime around 4th of July or so. And so my hope would be to come back to the board with much more information on that as it becomes available. But that's the first step, and then obviously we'll begin to share that information with a lot of partners around the region, since we, I think, as the board is directed, very desirous of this policy, but obviously we'll take partners and a funding collaboration to make it a real thing. So,
Thank you.
Thank you. Just one other thing, when you come back with the information from the consultant, are you going to also be able to give us what other agencies around the United States
Yes.
are doing and
Yes.
how their experience is?
yes, that is part of it as well. Yeah.
Thank you.
Good morning, Mr.
Good
Board
morning.
President, members of the board. Dividing the report that you have in front of you into three sections this morning. First one is vehicle and the system reliability. Then we'll speak for a few minutes about our on-time performance results and the initiatives we have underway. And thirdly, just around the overall operator support and, of course, the people side of the business around our frontline staff. Firstly, the bus maintenance of way and the fare equipment maintenance all exceeded the preventative maintenance objectives that we've set for the first quarter of 2016. One item I would note in terms of the fair equipment, and a tribute to Chris Tucker and his team, the fair equipment achieved the highest reliability rating since actually reporting ever started at 99.8%, which is really pretty tremendous, having worked in other agencies. It's hard to keep that equipment up to date, and they've done a really nice job on it. So the results are very strong. In terms of the rail equipment maintenance, it increased from the last quarter of 74.6% to what I'll call more of a normalized number in the mid-80s, 85.6%. That's about 11% improvement quarter over quarter. And I think the Q4 of 2015 was really attributed to the 19 vehicles that had the issue with the water, as you can probably recall late last October. In terms of the bus fixed route, it improved in miles between failures in 2016, the first quarter. I think this starts to reflect the newer age of the vehicles. We've really got what maybe refer to as the barbell effect going on, where we've had quite a long time ago a lot of aging the bus fleet. There's been some great investment being made, so we've got the average age is about 9.1 years now. But if you unbundle the age, you've got still some older buses working their way through to end of life, plus a lot of newer vehicles out there you may have seen riding the system. So we're still working on, but the average in the middle is very much helping the organization in terms of mean distance between failures and the overall performance of the system. In terms of MAX, the mean distance between failures, comparing Q4 2015 over last year, we were up about 25.6%, so a significant increase and a real focus by the maintenance team. We're even seeing this reflected in the on-time performance results and even getting the trains out in the morning. So we used to see quite a number of trains that were not meeting the inspection criteria to get out for the departure in the morning. Seen that really drop off now, so a tribute to Sam Mara and the whole maintenance team there. So it's improving. We're not quite where we were at Q1 of 2015, but that's also related to we've got a bigger fleet out there running new. We've got our Type 5 vehicles, which is not uncommon. Siemens, as our supplier, is taking us through all the trips and traps of how do you make the new vehicles. You break them in, you got to do modifications on them and such. So it's working its way through, and I think we're starting to see some of the benefit of that now. The Type 1 vehicles continues through the refurbishment, and so we'll see that contributing as well, probably to a lesser degree. Second area is on-time performance. This is an area that the board has been briefed on before. Specifically to the bus side, though, and I will talk about MAX in a minute. It's essentially, comparing to Q4 15, it's increased. It's about just less than 0.6, it's about 0.6% lower than Q1 of 15. The overall trending over the last 3 years, if you start to look at it with the focus that was placed by the agency on improving bus service, you can see the upward trend overall. So actually looking pretty healthy, and when you're in the mid-range like this, it's a solid performance, I would assess. In terms of the MAX Rail on-time performance, if you can recall back in December, our on-time performance for the month of December was 75%. Then for the first week in January, dropped to 70%, a real challenge for the agency, particularly looking at the long term. How do we stabilize this, and then how do we improve it? The last 31 days, I think, are quite encouraging. I think we are stabilizing the system. In fact, it's almost up a full 10 percentage points now. So the last 31 days of the organization's performance on MAX is now at 84.7%, again from the low of about 10 full points less of 75. So I really want to give a tribute to all the work. It's, again, not unlike First Avenue. It's almost symbolic of it really takes a cross-functional village to pull all these details together, whether you're focusing on practices and procedure changes that need to really be looked at as we look at becoming even a larger rail network with the Orange Line. So we've got an aging system plus a new system plus new operators. So when you put that all together, we need to look at how we actually are doing our business, and you're starting to see some of the early elements, I think, coming together with focusing on, to me, a real core area of focus for any transportation organization, whether it be marine, rail, air, and that's on-time performance. So I think all in all, if you add the Orange Line in, comparing year over year, again, we've gone about 81.6% for the quarter. That's 4.6% up. And if you go back to Q1 of 15, that's without the orange line. So you start adding a whole new line in, adding all the other complexity in. I think some of these elements are really coming together now, so encouraging. I won't repeat all the comments the general manager, Mr. McFarland, had provided, but I think the First Avenue team truly did a good job. We have to reload because August is not very far away. The Rose Festival is not very far away. This is truly a great logistics team that's here at TriMet, and I think it was epitomized by how you pull all this together. And just something for the board's understanding, some of this planning for First Avenue goes back well over 2 years ago. Although 2 weeks looks short and could be painful if it's not going well, but even the rail had to be ordered a year and a half ago from Europe. So many logistics have come to pass, including tabletop exercises. How do you execute where details actually matter? So I would like to put my name in the hat for really thanking the team to help pull this off. And again, our customers, because we really did cause inconvenience for them, and it really takes everybody, including our customers, to help us through this, and they were really good. West on-time performance, again, it's recovering from the last quarter of 2015, and the lower on-time performance of 94.1%. It's moving back to the 97% level. By commuter rail standards in North America, this is an excellent result. And I know West typically is up in that range, so these typically will go up and down. And we're a guest on the host railway, and so a lot of the issues are not related to us. For the most part, the PTC software, the train control software, that was one of the issues for us for implementation. We're at the final stages of this now, so probably by the end of June we should have this in place, and I think we'll see even stronger on-time performance coming up. In terms of the transportation employees attendance, essentially flat. Won't spend much more time on that. The system-wide boarding rides per revenue hour decreased 6.8%, Q4 14 over 15. I think the decline reflects you'll see the lower fuel prices, as Mr. McFarland has referenced earlier, and that's just not in this agency. When we check other agencies, they're going through some of the same challenges of lower fuel prices around the globe. We are looking at, we do see a relationship between customer satisfaction and on-time performance. And so as we improve the on-time performance, we'll see our accommodations and complaints. We do see the relationship between the two. So the more we can shore up that on-time performance, that just shores up our credibility and trust with our paying customers. The boarding rides per revenue hour, again, down 6.3% overall from previous year. The fixed route buses are down 9.8% year over year, and rails down 5.7%. Again, probably both attributed to the Orange Line. So the Orange Line has taken away some of the bus ridership and such, and we're still in the early days of a new large billion-dollar-plus capital investment. It takes time to help shape the region, so there's shaping and serving. We're clearly in the serving business of the Orange Line now, but there really is a shaping of new habits, potentially new investments in lead and such like that. So the Orange Line will continue, and I think bear fruit and increased ridership over the longer term. We will continue to monitor, though, and if there's adjustments we need to make in schedule and such, which we did last quarter, I think we're seeing some of the benefits of that, even reflected in the on-time performance today. The third area, is operator support. Happy to report for this quarter that the bus and rail recertification is now complete, fully for the organization, and it is ahead of schedule. So I want to thank all the trainers and such for moving through that at a really busy time. Bus collisions per 100,000 miles, they're up notably over the previous year, and over 86.1%. Specifically, we moved from 32 to 89 in January, year over year. So this is a significant uptick. So we are going to go back and look at our practices in bus hiring and training, and Harry Supporta is going to look at this from a safety perspective, see if there's anything underneath here that's might be training that we can try and get and help shape to help reduce that in the future. The max collisions are up from 9 to 18 also, so it's not just bus, it's also rail. We know traffics are up, construction. We're looking at 5 key intersections that we can remedy. Are there some shrubs we can move? There's some signage we're going to do. There's some general light capital construction we might need to around reconfiguration to open up those intersections. And we are working with our agency partners at the Portland Police, our transit police, et cetera, around what other ways can we mitigate in help keep MAX and the bus system safe. Bus operator complaints per 100,000 boarding rides, that's increased from 4 to 4.5. I think overall within the tolerance of margin. And we moved from 3 to 3.2 per 100,000 boardings on the safety side. So we'll monitor this area, and we've got it on the watch list for now. The complaints, again, I've talked about, that's decreased, and we think this is very much related to the on-time performance increase we're seeing in the organization. And bus increased by over 40% year over year, including even from 2014, it's up 85%. So going back a few years, things are actually trending quite positively in this area. And finally, rail has increased by 16.5% year over year, and again, positive over the quarter previously. Mr. Board President, that would conclude my report, and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. See any questions? Yes?
Yeah, just a question or sometime, can you give me some information on how what that report was compared to Seattle, San Francisco, or like cities?
Sure.
As far as the maintenance, the schedule, attendance, complaints, et cetera?
Sure, happy to do so.
There's no urgency?
Okay.
Just, I want something to,
relative to what, right?
Yeah, because this is, this is kind of working in I want some comparisons, that's all.
Sure.
Just so I know.
I think it's an excellent point. What I might say is that we are participating in a North American benchmarking group. And so the next meeting of the group is going to be in September, when we are going to be hosting it here at TriMet. And we are getting into exactly those comparisons. How do we stack up relative to other agencies, whether it be Denver or Charlotte or San Diego, Toronto, and each of the key areas, not only in maintenance, but also on the operational side, cost of IT, things of that nature. So we really are looking at a benchmarking it's a well-established group, the Royal College of London, and who oversees this even for the very large systems. So we'll be transferring those practices into systems of similar size. So happy to share that at the right time.
Excellent. Good question, thank you. Other questions? See none, thank you, Doug.
Thank you.
Thorough report. Look forward to that comparison, that'll be good.
Okay, and Mr. Board President, I have one other update. As you know, last week there was a very important vote for the future of transit in the region at the Joint Policy Advisory Committee at Metro. Again, a very favorable vote for the development of our continued development of our transit system, and I'm looking for Bernie to come up, and I think we've got a couple slides to show with you and just sort of describe the outcome of that action, as well as the next steps that involve TriMet associated with it. So take it away, Mr. Bottomley.
Good morning, Board, Chair Warner. Just a brief update on a project that we've been working on for the last 9 months or so. Quite actively, a decision that JPAC, the Regional Transportation Funding Advisory Committee, has been working on. TriMet secured significant funding from that activity, $80 million in project development, planning, engineering, and hopefully construction on the Southwest Corridor. $25 million for the PAL Division project, which would be for final design and construction on that project. Both of those allocations are intended to leverage federal discretionary funding, so that's money that would otherwise go to other jurisdictions around the country if we don't compete for it. In the case of the Southwest Corridor, potentially as much as $1.2 billion in federal matching dollars. And in case of the PAL Division Corridor, $100 million is what we're targeting in what the federal government calls small starts. So significant leverage potential there. In addition to that, JPAC approved $12 million in bonding for project development. This is a new, relatively new element to what JPAC is allocating funds for. It was developed in partnership between TriMet, ODOT, and Metro. 10 million of that 12 will go to do project development around regional congestion bottlenecks. And the three that ODOT has identified are the I-205 Abernathy Bridge crossing, which is a significant choke point on I-205, and is also a structure that lacks current seismic stability. The 217 corridor in Washington County, which President Warner is very familiar with, and I think most people in the region are familiar with the congestion issues faced on that corridor. And then thirdly, the Rose Quarter interchange, I-5, I-84 area, which is a regional bottleneck as well. So that $10 million will be allocated to ODOT to develop those projects so that they are in a position where they can leverage outside funding. In the case of the 2017 legislative session, hopefully we will be showing the legislature that there are real projects and real improvements to congestion in the region that can be built if they are willing to fund an increase in the state transportation program. And in the case of the 205 project, ODOT is applying for federal funding, $100 million out of the FAST Act for freight projects. And then we hope in 2018 that we'll be in a position to have a regional bond measure and that those three projects are candidates for inclusion in that regional bond measure. So all three of these pots will be bonded. The first two will be bonded by TriMet, the project and I should say $2 million for the Safe Routes to Schools program, which is to develop trails and pedestrian and bike projects around the region, focusing on safe routes to schools. So the first two pots will be bonded by TriMet, and the last pot, the $2 million, will be bonded by TriMet. The $10 million, either TriMet will bond or ODOT will self-finance. We're still working out the details on that. And to service those bonds, the region is making a commitment of future federal dollars that flow into the region between 2019 and 2034. And this is a process that we've undertaken in the past. We're currently receiving $16 million a year in these same funds to service bonds that were issued to build the Orange Line project. So it's a familiar pattern that we've used in the past. So the next steps on this are that Metro Council needs to take final action on the recommendation from JPACT, but we don't anticipate any issues there. The Metro Council members of JPACT voted in favor of the resolution. After that, TriMet and Metro will enter into actually modify an existing intergovernmental agreement. That $16 million a year that I mentioned will modify the IGA that governs the allocation of those funds. And then TriMet, Metro, and ODOT will enter into an IGA for project development around those three bottleneck projects that I mentioned, so that we understand what products will be developed as part of that project development process. And then finally, TriMet will use cash, short-term borrowing and long-term borrowing to supply the funds, the $117 million in total funds, on the terms that they're needed. So some of those dollars are needed soon, such as PAL Division. Others, such as Southwest Corridor, won't be needed until a few years from now. So we'll pick the most financially advantageous, lowest cost, lowest risk mechanism for supplying those dollars. And then the resources will be used, in addition to those project development elements that I mentioned. We'll keep moving on PAL Division. As you know, we've made some changes to that, to the focus of that effort, to focus more on the division piece first. So we'll use these funds to finalize the planning and begin the construction on that project. And then in the short term on Southwest Corridor, continue the planning and development process, and eventually construction of that light rail project. So, be happy to answer any questions.
So, our agency will have input with ODOT and studying the intersections, how it affects, and okay, so they aren't acting. Or, it's a joint.
Exactly. So what's relatively new in this equation is that the region is expressing its desire to support ODOT's project development work. ODOT has already allocated $5 million to bringing those 3 projects forward, and this is funding intended to match that, but it also knits us together in terms of the work, the planning that's being done. And ultimately, our expectation is, and our hope is, that these 3 projects would be folded into a regional funding measure that would include both Southwest Corridor Light Rail funding and funding for those 3 projects.
And the second, if I may, Mr. President.
Please.
I know you don't have these information, but any idea of the amount of CO2 that would be reduced if things sped up?
I don't off the top of my head, but the region's climate smart strategy includes making significant investments in the regional transportation plan, the RTP. And these projects are in the RTP, so they would support the overall strategy of the Climate Smart Solutions Plan.
Okay, good. Thanks.
Yeah.
You mentioned that taking these actions now would help secure federal funding. I guess 2 questions, really. You said it's competitive. In other words, we'd be up against others. So is there a risk that we wouldn't get that funding?
There's always that risk, yes. We don't, there's no guarantee. But the region has a 30-plus year history of winning those grants. Delivering the Orange Line project on time and under budget, for example, and frankly, every other project that we've done has been on time and either at or under budget. Puts us in a position that makes us very competitive for those federal discretionary grants. We quietly like to say that FTA loves TriMet, frankly. We never embarrass them. We are an example that they use for the rest of the country in terms of how to manage these projects. So our submittals compete very well at the national level.
And then another question, the federal funds, have they been allocated, or is there any risk that these programs might go away?
There's always that risk, you can't hold a current Congress to, or a current Congress can't hold a future Congress to a policy, so they could always change that. But we have, 30, 40 years of experience under our belt with these programs. They're very popular nationally. There have been suggestions in past years of doing away with some of these programs on the transit side. And there's a very strong coalition of both Democrats and Republicans who come together and have defeated any of those efforts, and they really haven't gotten very far. So we feel very confident that these programs are going to move forward and actually are getting more popular over time. The line of folks who are interested in both the large federal projects, which are the new starts, and the smaller projects, which are the small starts, is very significant, and it runs the gamut of political, in terms of blue and red areas. It's both. So there's a very bipartisan support for these programs.
Great, thank you.
Yeah.
Anything else?
Okay.
Thank you. Good piece of work on your part.
It's a real vote of confidence for the region for TriMet. Yeah. Yep. Okay.
Thank you, Bernie, for all your work on your help on this. Amazing. So, Mr. Board President, that concludes our report to you, and happy to answer any questions the board may have.
I see no other questions. So let's move on then to consent agenda. For those watching, the items on a consent agenda are considered routine and may be approved by the board in one blanket motion. However, any board member may remove an item from the consent agenda portion of the agenda for discussion or questions by requesting such action prior to consideration of a motion on this portion of the agenda. So I point out there's actually 6 items on our consent agenda today. Minutes for the April 27th, 2016 meeting. Resolution authorizing transfer of appropriated funds into this year's budget. A resolution calling or authorizing a series of on-call contracts for construction management services for building construction and civil construction. A resolution authorizing a contract with Casso Consulting for development of technical specifications. A resolution authorizing a 5-year contract with Cummins for Cumming engines parts and Fleet Guard filtration products. And then finally, a resolution for the board acting in its capacity as the TriMet Contract Review Board, exempting from competitive bidding and going with a contract for construction manager general contract or general contractor services for elevator end-of-life replacement and refurbishment. So looking at those 6, is there any items the board would like to have removed for the consent agenda or has questions? Yes.
Questions on 16-05-28?
Please, yeah, but please, yes.
Mr. General Manager, perhaps you can help me understand in this particular contract, SOJ is one of the contractors that's being proposed to have this contract awarded to them. When I look at the scoring by the EV, the Work Plan and Diversity Plan, SOJ has an 18. But accordingly, SOJ says that they do not plan to do any subcontracting and therefore does not have anything in terms of what they hope to achieve for diversity. So my question becomes 2, why are they so highly rated? And then number 2, what is the makeup of this company?
So I may look for some reinforcements if there are some in the audience, perhaps Sandy Bradley, who's filling in from Capital Projects. But let me just note that the criteria that were scored on was work plan and diversity. So they scored very high on the work plan portion of it. This firm is headquartered here in Portland. It's a very well-known firm in terms of doing major civil sorts of construction management work. We've had the opportunity to work with them in the past. Very expert at what they do. And very highly skilled. So my sense is that expertise came through in the work plan and the elements of the work plan that were scored for this proposal, even though they did not score so highly on the diversity element. So, Ms. Bradley, perhaps you could.
Bit.
Yes, thank you.
That's all correct. They are, as you indicated, a local firm for about 30 years. They have essentially 8 principals. And they do not expect to use any subcontractors. All the work would be performed by the company, and that's why there's no DBE component. As Neil indicated, they helped us, they managed the streetcar loop project and also served one of their members that was a subcontract to our principal designer on the east segment and served as an office engineer. So it's the makeup of the company and their contracting plan that the reason that they don't have any DBE percentage proposed.
Okay, but then address my second question. What is the diversity makeup of the company? Do they have any diversity in their 8 principals? Are the 8 principals all the same?
Though I could look for help, I believe the workforce, at least among the 8 principals, would not reflect any diversity. I could be corrected, but I believe that's the case.
Okay. Thank you. That just raises concern for me because of the push and record that TriMet has working towards including diversity in its contracting. And again, to start reflecting back to companies that do not have any in their makeup or do not intend to do any in terms of producing the work gives me concerns now. And so I question SOJ being a really good candidate for doing this work.
Okay.
I would just perhaps just note that sort of in the realm of diversity, as you see in all the other proposals, we have and continue to emphasize that. But again, sometimes we look for precise expertise, and some of those firms may not be of the same character. And these assignments would be, frankly, focusing on the particular expertise of this firm. I'd love to say that every contract met those criteria sometimes, but I think what we show is overwhelmingly, we do, and in much more than just prototypical fashion. We actually dig deep to make sure that those contracting opportunities are there. Just note that as sort of background as well.
Is there a reason why we put work plan and diversity in the same category?
Yes, there is. And basically, it's because we want to see it as a whole. And frankly, we're on much stronger defensible grounds when we do that, just given the state of current law.
So if I'm following up on it, I'll follow up on this question. So if I read this, they actually had the poorest ratings of the groups. Is that correct, on the building construction?
Right.
In that category?
That's correct.
And then also on the civil construction, right? So I think we've acknowledged that their plans and their diversity is not on par with some of the others who presented. But I think the concern is we're still looking at, we may want to utilize their services in the future. But I think what the board is concerned about is that should be a consideration as we move forward and actually select from these groups to do contracts or do pieces of work under this contract. And that, I assume, is something you will do. Am I correct?
Yes, and I would note on the civil construction side, we are only proposing contracts with 4 firms.
Okay.
Not the,
All right.
not the 3 with the lower scores.
SOJ would not looking at any of those.
That's correct.
Okay, that's all right. I don't know whether that helps any. Go
I
ahead.
just got one quick comment in regards to this. I think the major issue, and I agree with Dr. Bethel in regards to the challenge that we see here in this firm, who's highly talented, bringing forth their skill sets and has performed for us historically. But again, I think we've got to continue to press on the diversity issue to make sure that we keep that in the forefront. The heartening thing about this situation is that if it were not for the fact that we were going to choose multiple potential providers, they would not be in the hunt. And specifically, it's because of their lack of diversity. So this sends a message, I think, to our current contractors and future contractors that we're serious about this. So if it were not for the fact that we were going to have multiple contractors that we contract with in this situation, then they would be at the bottom of the list, would not be included. And that's the heartening piece here, because if you look at the other scores, they're right in the hunt, except for when you get to the diversity piece, the work plan and diversity piece. And it sounds like their work plan was very adequate, but they really missed on the diversity side of things. So I think it continues to send the message that we're serious about this issue, and we'll encourage all of our future contracts and current contractors to make sure that they've got that in the forefront of their plans.
Yes.
Sandy, the way you expressed the staffing there, you referred to the 8 principals. Are those the only staff at this firm?
No, and I'm sorry, I don't have the total staffing in my head.
Where I'm going with this is, okay, they might have the resources in-house. It's not just these 8 people, 8 principals. But given their diversity score and how it affects their rating on this item, and the fact that we have done a lot of business with the firm, they'd like to do business in the future, maybe as part of this is encourage them to, if they're not going to be subcontracting work, as a longer term kind of thing, maybe they need to look at their hiring practices.
Can certainly communicate that.
All right, so Director Bethel, would you like to leave this on the consent agenda, or are we going to pull it off for consideration separately?
I think, given what Director Stovall said, is that if it had not been for the multiples being considered, this would be a company that would not be there. My great concern is again, Portland Milwaukee Light Rail is gone. We did a great job in terms of diversity, DBE, and all of that. If we now come to doing contracts now, and we don't stick with trying to make sure we have this, and what really surprises me as general manager is that this company has done work in the past, and quite a lot, I understand. And if they have not learned yet that they need to do something about diversity, I really question and agree with Director that they need to look at their hiring practices. And so I'm betwixt, as we would say, between the devil and the deep blue sea when it comes down to this consensus item. With that noted, and asking that as you do talk with SOJ, to kindly, gently, humbly, forcefully let them know that if you want to continue to do business in the future, you need to look at your hiring practices. This is the 21st century, and it's time to come into the century and recognize where you are.
We'd be happy to have that conversation with them.
And if you need me to come talk with them, just call me.
Will do.
Glad to come.
All right, good. So I think what you're saying is you're comfortable moving forward the consent
We'll move
agenda
set with,
as
move
as-
set.
All right,
This time.
all right.
Thank
So
you.
is there-
This time.
I'm sorry.
Yeah, I just want to ask a question on another consent
Okay,
agenda.
all right, please do.
On the elevator, it's $22 million worth of work for the exemption.
This allows us to proceed with a process in place of the low bidding. And
Right.
yes,
I know, and this is and this is somebody we've had experience with, the agency has used. Is this for the elevator oh, it's a CMGC, huh?
we are not awarding the contract. We are asking permission to proceed with the process.
And use CMGC instead of the low bid.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. And these things always raise concern to me, but excuse me, pardon me, I just like to get some more information why this is.
So
And I don't need it,
attached,
huh? Pardon me?
attached are the findings that are
I know.
the actual findings associated with doing this, and we also do a public hearing on this item
Right.
separately to sort of make sure that all voices have been heard about this as contracting choice, and we can report that to the board associated with that. My own sense is that the CMGC process is the right process to select to select the actual contractor for this very critical work. We need to make sure that the qualifications of the firm are absolutely superb, because this is critical public safety issues. And we need also help on flexibility about when is rehabilitation a better option than actual replacement. And so all of that has to be done in conjunction with the contractor, who frankly will bring a certain specific technology along with them in terms of the actual elevator themselves. Depending upon the firm and the supplier of the elevator. So it's all very critical for us to have the input of the contractor during the design and review process. And that's why we usually select that, in those situations, select the contractor via this more flexible process that allows us to both consider price, obviously always part of the evaluation, but also the qualifications, the past experience, the safety record, and as well as their diversity and subcontracting work plan. And allows us much more flexibility in terms of making sure we make the right decision as we move forward. Because again, these facilities are very important to our customers, and we want to make sure that when they're out of service, that's for a minimized piece of time and really focus. So that's the recommendation, that's the basis for the recommendation for CMGC.
And they'll be subject to the diversity requirements, or?
Absolutely.
Okay.
As a matter of fact, I think our record
we-
would show that we actually do better in the diversity arena when we use the CMGC process, because we can work with the contractor to really maximize those opportunities.
And then, I guess will they be hiring from the area? The subs?
Yes. There's obviously, we haven't selected the contractor
I
yet,
know,
but that is
I
part
know,
of
but
the,
I'm bringing that up,
yeah.
that we'd like to,
That is part of the evaluation of, of their capabilities and qualifications is obviously the people they bring on the job.
I've had experience in the past in other situations where a lot of license plates said Texas on it, on job sites, so. That's all, thank you.
Yep. Okay?
Okay.
All right. So with that, is there any other questions? Is there a motion then to approve the consent agenda as presented?
So moved.
Have a motion, have a second. Is there any further discussion? I think I'd just say good conversation. Thank you. And here's, sometimes we say, why do we put this on a consent agenda? But I think most of this is routine, and I'm glad we're looking at it. So
Yeah.
with that, all those in favor of the motion to approve the consent agenda, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? This motion is approved unanimously. Thank you very much. Well, let's move on to our resolutions. The first resolution is a resolution 16-05-32, which is adopting the fiscal year 2016-17 annual budget and appropriating funds. And you can talk to us about the notes that are in the packet or any other qualifiers we need to have before we.
Exactly. Well, Mr. Board President, members of the board, thank you very much. And obviously, this is not new, but I did want to take the opportunity to sort of reinterpret, if you will, and represent some of the key things that the fiscal year 17 budget will accomplish for our riders and for our region. I think it's a really very positive funding blueprint. And again, the budget is fundamentally the most direct planning document that you see because it really does plan what we can accomplish from a financial standpoint over the next year. And I would just note that there are a number of objectives that you set early, actually, before the calendar said 2016. You actually set a series of objectives for us, working with the Finance and Audit Committee in particular, to make sure that we achieved with this budget. And I think we are hitting on all of those notes. Some of them we'd like to hit a little harder as time goes on, as resources permit. But again, I think we do achieve all of your key objectives and those objectives that were lined up with your strategic financial plan as well. I'll let Dee go through a few of the key topics, but I would just note that at the TSCC hearing last month, you heard from commissioners how when they look at all the other budgets that they look at as part of their duties as a County board, or a TSCC, a Tax Supervising and Conservation Commission, they said our budget was a model for other governments. And so my thanks to Dee and her staff for the great work in putting this together. But also, these are, as you well know, agency-wide initiatives as we put these things together. So, Dee, I think you're in a position to describe a few of the highlights.
Thank you. Good morning, President Warner, members of the board. As Mr. McFarland says, this is our final round with this budget. This is taking it from hopefully the approved status that you approved last month to the final adopted state. So we'll hit a few of the key facts that this is based on. Our payroll tax, it includes an overall increase of $24 million. The total for payroll tax, which includes the new increment, is $336.8 million. The full year of the new increment will be experienced in fiscal year 2017, $5.7 million. That's all dedicated to new service. Passenger revenue indicates an overall increase of $1.1 million, primarily due to opening of the Orange Line. There is no fare increase, but the financial forecast, let me remind you, does show a 3.5% in fiscal year 2018, and we'll be revisiting that soon. Going on, federal funding, we're expecting a 2% overall increase year to year. The FAST Act was passed, of course, and it provides us with many more years of security than we previously had. The largest increases are in fiscal year 2020 and in fiscal year 2024 due to two of our lines to being in service for 8 years at those particular points in time. So here are the numbers for you. Our total budget requirements are $1,048.4 million. Our day-to-day operating budget is $507.4 million. The orange line max FFGA currently shows $225 million, $100 million from fiscal year 2016 that we don't expect to receive until after July 1st. And then the $125 million estimated in fiscal year 2017, we just received word, wouldn't you know, just a few days before we brought the new piece to you, was that it's actually going to be $100 million. So that position will remain over budget for the rest of the year. Under budget. So our capital and operating projects requirements are $157.1 million, and our pass-through requirements are $6.5 million. It leaves a fund balance and contingency of $152.4 million. As you recall, this is to meet our strategic financial plan requirements of both the 3% budget contingency and also the 2.5 months of operating reserve. Moving on to the budget themes that Neil was referencing earlier, the board, you set these as our themes. Safety and security is number 1, implementing service enhancement plans number 2, maintaining and preserving the system is 3, improving system reliability, and then finally advancing regional corridor projects. We'll just cover each of these just briefly. Moving on to safety and security, the budget includes projects for rail pedestrian safety enhancement program, continued SMS training and recertification training, our CCTV upgrade from analog to digital networked, and numerous other safety and security investments through our capital improvement program. Our service enhancement plans, bus service up 4.3%. That equates to 1,264 hours a week. 37% of that is for reliability. 63% is to expand service. The annualized cost of this expanded service is $6.1 million, but that does include the 5.7 that we spoke about a few slides ago. Moving on to maintain and preserve the system. Blue Line Station rehabilitation is in there. Elevator refurbishments and replacements, bus replacements, 33 replacements and 17 expansion buses this year alone. MAX system enhancements, MAX track and structures, West track maintenance, and IT servers and equipment. Improving system reliability, you have heard a great deal about this, and you will continue to hear a great deal about this as it is quite a priority for us. Improvements in control center staffing, additional training, coaching for MAX operators, added rail and bus mechanics, signal maintainer apprentices, and a number of studies with a long-term view. Other key capital improvements include the Orange Line second shelter, facilities buildings, LRV retrofits, a red line to Fairplex in the design and procurement phases, Powell Garage, relocating lift, also in design and procurement, grant projects, IT investments, continuation of our e-fare system, starting our central precinct partnership with PDC. That is a long-term project as well. Advancing regional projects, still Powell Division BRT design is continuing in fiscal year 2017, and the Southwest Corridor locally preferred alternative design analysis of potential impacts and ongoing public outreach also in 2017. HOP Fast Pass, high priority for the agency. Budget is capital $5.9 million to finish the infrastructure. Ongoing operating $3.3 million for call center staffing and cards. Support in marketing and customer communications. There will be a net offset to the operating $3.3 million that as we continue to move the start date, it changes just a little bit, but we're estimating it to be in the $800,000 to $900,000 net cost to the agency. So, to the big difference between what you approved and what we are asking you to adopt, And you have a summary of those changes as the exhibit attached to the resolution. The net increase in the fiscal year 2017 budget since approval is $2,092,960. The majority of those, and there are a number of them on the list, are all related to the same thing, which is basically shifts in funding requirements among capital projects that affect the beginning and ending fund balances that are reflected in the budget. The increased expected revenue on operating grants, reduction in state in lieu revenue. When PSU withdrew from the Oregon University system, it's actually going to be a bit of a positive thing for us, because now that they are recognized as an employer paying the employer share of the payroll tax. But the budget reflects a reduction in this particular line item. The budget also reflects now reduced growth in expected costs for the healthcare systems. And as I mentioned, we do have the full list, and I know some of those numbers are big. So if you have any questions, please feel free to ask them. I have Nancy Young, our Director of Budgets and Grants, here to handle any technical aspects of those questions for you, so feel free. Any questions?
Mr. President.
Please.
Two things.
Yeah.
You mentioned that in the full funding grant agreement, that there's going to be a reduction of $25 million, and that's going to make that line item under budget. And when in this budget cycle, how will we plan to address that under budget piece?
That is related to the capital project, PMLR alone. So we had an expectation of funding. Quite honestly, we've really only been expecting $100 million, but we had to put $125 million in, because that's what was in the budget originally, not the appropriations. We have our debt service covered. What would have happened is that if we'd gotten the extra $25 million, we would have applied it to our debt service, which would have meant that our debt service on the end, the tail, the length of the debt service, would have pulled back. And so since the federal government is actually paying for 50% of our debt service costs on this project for the duration of the debt service, it's actually not a bad thing. So since it would have only been applied to debt service and future expected payments of debt service, it won't have any effect on our operating budget.
Okay, good. Second question for me, when we talk about the e-fare program, I'm just wanted to get in a sense, when we first started and approved e-fare, how are we in relation to what was projected cost then and where we are now seemingly for actual costs?
We are still on budget. We we expected to spend more money this year than we actually have. We're pushing forward roughly $15 million into next year. As you may recall, we are paying for this project through bond proceeds. So it's, I would say, I will certainly bring Chris back for a full recap, but I'm happy with where we are financially on this project.
Okay, thank you. Thank you, Mr. President.
You bet. Other questions? All right, this has taken a lot of work to get us where we are today. I want to thank the staff for their work with our partners and outreach to get us to where we are today. It's a good budget. It's nice to see where we are. So I'd like to see us have a motion to approve Resolution 16-05-32, which is adopting our 2016-2017 budget and appropriating the funds to do our work.
So moved.
I hear a motion. How about Dr. Bethel and Director Martin for that one, okay? Further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-05-32, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Motion's approved unanimously. Again, good work. Congratulations.
Thank you.
Thank you, Dee, and thank you, Nancy, for your great work on all of this.
All right, the next item is a Resolution 16-05-33, which is authorizing modification of the streetcar operating agreement with the City of Portland.
So, Mr. Board President, included in the budget that you just adopted were, of course, the transfer of funds to the City of Portland related to the operation of the streetcar. Again, much of that money actually flows back to us in terms of employee salaries and benefits, because obviously the operators are TriMet employees, as well as a number of the maintenance employees. And under a master agreement that we adopted some time ago with board involvement, we have a established formula for the distribution of cost between the City of Portland and TriMet on the streetcar. And that will change over time as certain milestones and targets are met, particularly related to ridership. And I would just note that this is really a relatively modest change from the past year in terms of the overall streetcar operating agreement. We have trued up the number of operators that has actually taken to operate the loop. Again, when we were at this point last year, we had no operating experience with the full loop because, of course, the bridge wasn't opened. And so that's a little bit of a truing up on that one. And so just relatively minor increases otherwise, and one additional utility worker as well, just in order to sort of keep the system in good running order. So with that, I'd certainly be happy to answer any questions, but I think, again, this falls from a stream of actions, including the adoption of the master agreement and then past funding agreements. And again, it implements the budget that you just adopted. So with that, I'd recommend your approval.
Any questions of staff on this operating agreement? Seeing none, then, do we have a motion to approve Resolution 16-05-33?
So moved.
Have a motion, is there a second?
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-05-33, please signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Seeing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, let's go on to Resolution 16-05-34, which is a resolution authorizing a contract with CH2M Hill for the development of a transit asset management plan, or known as TAMP. I've never heard that before, but okay.
A new acronym for us all. Mr. Board President, members of the board, one of the stunning statistics that sort of pops out of this resolution memo is that TriMet has over $3 billion in assets. So you might imagine that sort of keeping track of all of that and keeping it all in good repair is a big task in and of itself. I'd also just note that the federal government, based on lots of experiences around other properties around the country, have really upgraded the requirements of their grantees related to transit asset management and have issued new regulations or circulars associated with their expectations of grantees like us in terms of developing transit access or transit asset management plans. And so in that regard, we have been doing a lot of work recently, both updating our current series of interlocking spreadsheets that track these assets. And actually, I think staff does a very good job of doing that and looking at the useful life of switches, as we heard earlier, and of things like roofs and other key components of our overall asset, our set of assets. But what this will be is really a much more integrated database program that will actually track these things and put a little bit more rigor into the system. And it will be in a manner that is actually compliant with the federal circular that's out. So I think it's a very worthy and necessary upgrade of our asset management tracking. I've often said about the federal government's focus on this is that for TriMet, this focus is coming just in the nick of time because, again, we're not Chicago and we're not New York and we're not Boston, but now our system is, this year, our rail system will be 30 years old. So it is really very timely for us to really begin to focus much more on transit access management. So that's what this RFP was really about, is getting us some professional help to really integrate the best thinking in the industry into our current system and asset tracking. And as you saw in the memo, there were a request for proposals. We ended up with 2 finalists. Our recommendation is a very strong recommendation for CH2M Hill, which, as you know, we have worked with in the past in a number of different areas. This is, of course, a different set of consultants at CH2M Hill, but again, it's a firm that we're very experienced with. I would also note that the proposed price was very attractive, and I think this reflects the experience that the firm has in actually doing these projects and beginning to develop the software and the expertise necessary to implement this elsewhere and bringing that expertise to Portland. And again, we believe that CH2M has been a star related to the diversity and transit equity issues associated with their work. So we do see in this a relatively lower percentage, which is about 10% disadvantaged business participation. But again, I think CH2M Hill has a very active recruitment and hiring and retention strategy related to minority employees in particular, and women. So with that, I would strongly recommend your approval, and I think this will be work that we'll see progress, and we'll come back and brief the board on this work as it progresses throughout the year. We actually expect by about the end of the year that we'll be in a much different state than we are today, given this contract. So with that, again, I recommend your approval.
Thank you, Mr. General Manager. Questions for Neil or other staff? Yeah.
I'd like to kind of poke on this price difference a little bit, if I may. Our staff's estimate for the cost of this work was $3 million. ABS said they could do it for $2.3 million, and CH2M is about $940,000, which is wonderful, but that huge difference, quite honestly, makes me nervous. And I understand having more expertise, but $1 million difference, that's huge.
Could Nancy Young will come up and address that, because indeed, I asked that question as well, and I think there's very excellent answers.
Well, and while Nancy's coming up too, the other thing that when you see a difference like this, that always kind of raises the concern is, are they going to try to make up the difference later? So if you can kind of cover all of that, if possible.
Right. So President Warner and members of the board, thank you. So we put a lot of time into looking at the vendors who made a proposal for this. And you're right, there is a big discrepancy or difference between the proposal from CH2M and ABS Group. And the biggest portion of that difference, there's actually kind of two components to this. One is the development of the plan itself. And then the second piece of it is the actual inventorying and condition assessment of all of our assets. And what we found in our interviewing and based on the experience and the skills and the abilities of the individuals is that CH2M actually has a significant amount more experience in actually developing the plans than the other proposers had. So what we had asked for in our RFP, they were able to demonstrate where they have done this for other transit entities that are out there, where ABS Group, while we felt that they were a strong contender, didn't have the actual experience in the plan development. So we looked at it and said, we kind of feel like they're cutting their teeth on us with their proposal for the plan itself. If you look at the cost for the inventorying of it, it was a little bit more similar there. And what we found in that piece, if I can comment on that, is that some of the proposers, some of them were proposing that, hey, we'll just go out and inventory 10% of what you've got. Others were proposing, we'll do 100%. So you can imagine the cost there fluctuated quite significantly. So TriMet team sat back and looked at it and said, okay, what do we want inventoried? What makes sense for us? What best meets our need? So we came up with a list. Some areas are going to be inventoried 100%. Some of those areas will be inventoried 50%, but we have set the standard, and that way when we went out and we received the BAFOs, we were comparing apples to apples in that process. In addition, I would also comment the difference between the two. ABS Group recommended an IT solution that is a custom design by one of their subcontractors. And while we really liked the sound of the bells and whistles that it came with, our concern was that if anything happens to that subcontractor, what's going to happen to the application that we're relying on? And in that, we were told that we would be given the code which is really great, but then we have to find somebody who understands that code and can continue to program that as we go forward. And then in discussions with our information technology team, Tim McHugh, they were very clear they would not be able to support that application. The IT solution that CH2M proposed is more readily available, more widely used, easier supported. So that was another element in our consideration before selecting a final vendor here.
And what is the potential for price increases as we go forward with this effort?
Well, we feel like we have put together a really good and very clear proposal or an RFP on what our expectations were and what our end deliverables should be. And where we would see, or where we were anticipating some fluctuation, was in the inventorying piece. And that's why we sat back and we said, this is what we want done. So you respond to us. So unless we change our mind on the inventory piece to do more or less, I wouldn't anticipate any changes there. And because CH2M has significant experience in putting together the plans, very similar to what we're asking for, I'm not anticipating big fluctuations there either. I just don't see a need for there to be a big variation in that.
Okay. Thank you.
I might just add that CH2M, as a frequent contractor, I think has been very fair with us, and I think I would expect that to continue, because I think they want to continue to be a frequent contractor with TriMet.
Okay, that helps a lot. Thank you.
Okay.
Yeah, I'm just as concerned as Craig, or do the other firms, okay, first of all, is this a common program around the country at transit agencies? Or
So
the
the-
TAMP?
Yeah, so the requirement for the Transit Asset Management Plan, this is a new requirement. We're expecting the final ruling to come out any moment here. Once that final ruling comes out, we'll have 3 months within which to get to the feds what our priorities are. And then we have a 2-year window within which to have the entire plan and inventory, along with the condition assessment, completed. Has to reflect a 4-year period of time and be updated annually, along with us re-reporting to them what our priorities are on an annual basis. So the requirement is, it's going to be a new requirement. It is not final yet. We're anticipating it any time, but it's been in the works for quite a long time, getting to this point. And so some transit agencies have already started because they're bigger, their infrastructure is more. TriMet is, we see that it's coming. The requirement is going to hit, and we want to make sure that we are able to meet that first requirement, which is submitting our priorities to them within 3 months of that rule being final. So it's new, but we've known about it for quite a while and have been looking at it.
And have you had discussions with other agencies around the country on this?
Yes, yes, we have. Not only have we had conversations with like WMATA, Chicago, some of the other transit agencies, but we've been involved in webinars and training sessions, discussion groups regarding the development of the Transit Asset Management Plan. We have attended APTA conferences and attended the seminars there. We've networked with other individuals and communicated with them a lot on how's the plan development, and then separate from that, what are you doing for the inventory and condition assessment pieces of it? Is it 100% expectation, or can you sample, and how does that work? So we've put quite a bit of effort in.
All right.
Yeah.
Good, thank you.
You're welcome.
So we think, questions answered? Looks like a pretty good proposal to me. I'm pleased that
Yeah,
CH
very pleased with it.
Got to work. I'm not worried about their price creep. I think they'll do a good job for us. So there's a motion to approve Resolution 1605-34.
Second.
Have a second? Is there any further discussion? All right, all those in favor then of the motion to approve Resolution 16-05-34 signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, the motion is approved unanimously. All right, the last piece of resolution on our business agenda today is Resolution 1605-35, which is authorizing the purchase of 2 diesel multiple unit rail cars from Dallas Area Rapid Transit.
Mr. Board President, members of the board, this is a familiar item because not too long ago we were in front of you requesting permission to bid for some similar diesel multiple units that were held by a Canadian firm in New Brunswick. We were outbid in that situation, so we weren't successful in securing those cars. But a new opportunity has appeared. The DART, the Dallas Area Rapid Transit System, runs DMUs between Dallas and Fort Worth on their Trinity line currently. And they also have other commuter rail service on that line, and they are intending to standardize their service to bi-level cars with push-pull locomotives, and which allows them to, frankly, move their DMUs out of service on the Trinity line. So there is an opportunity. They put out an expression of interest, as they call it, and we are responding to that expression of interest with your permission by June 15th. And so what this resolution is really just permission for us to continue to engage in those conversations, potential bid situation, depending upon how Dallas chooses to deal with these assets that they no longer want on their property. Again, so there is no specific price at this point in time, but we wanted to bring this resolution to the board just so that you knew the opportunity was there, and ask for your authority to pursue the opportunity over the next month, and obviously we'll keep you appraised of all the steps. Again, the key issue with the West service, and the reason that we would like to have these additional diesel multiple units, is really related to the maintenance of the vehicles. Some of our vehicles are beginning to age, and we know they're going to need to be out of service. And we're just at the point where, frankly, we need every vehicle that we have to make the pullouts on a daily basis. As you note in your performance reports, West has an enormously high on-time performance and pull-out ratio, up in the high 90%, 98% on a regular basis, oftentimes 100%. And we want to maintain that level of customer service as we continue to develop and grow that corridor. This would also give us the opportunity, should ridership increase, to be able to have more double car trains serving the corridor on the same number of trips, but double cars, so more capacity on each of the trips than we currently have today. Oftentimes we run single West DMU units on many of the trips that we have. So our estimate is shown that this would not exceed $1.5 million. That's, I think, a reasonable estimate based on what we've seen from some of these other experiences that we've been in. The cars would need some rehabilitation, some work to bring ready for service on the West Line, and that includes making them compatible with our signal system. And as you know, we've done quite a bit of additional work on that to be FRA compliant with what is termed the positive train control system. So again, some additional work on the car is necessary in that regard, and a few others necessary. So the budget would include the required rehabilitation as well. I have both Darren Morin and Jason Groves here, who are experts on these cars, know them forward and backwards, and they're certainly happy to answer any questions because I probably have exceeded all my knowledge with this report to you. But I do recommend your approval.
Questions?
Sure. What's the average life expectancy of a brand new one?
Well, I would say a brand new one is at least 40 to 50 years. Okay. In the case of these are, however, just to prove myself wrong, these were generally manufactured in the 50s, and they've been rehabilitated to be essentially modern, up-to-date vehicles. Wow. So to a large extent, these are great big rolling hunks of steel that have a lot of components on them, and then once you change out the components, then there's another element of life that's been added to it. And these cars have sort of flexibly been shown to have that ability to stretch out their life over a long period of time. Darren, anything to add?
No, I just might add one thing in terms of the purchasing being used. There's no commercially available
yes.
FRA compliant DMU on the market right now. So if we decided that because our ridership was to explode for some reason, gas prices went up, that we needed to buy additional cars, but strictly because of ridership, that would be at least a 2-year process if we could find a traditional car builder that would build us 2 cars, which we would never be able to do in any fiscally prudent fashion. Those cars would be well over $5 million.
Yeah.
Honestly, a traditional car builder won't build us 2 cars or 4 cars.
Because it's too expensive? Because it's too expensive?
Yes, it's not.
One-offs?
One-offs, exactly. The typical car manufacturer likes to see orders in the number of 20, you know,
Yeah.
as sort of a minimum, frankly.
Well, I think these cars were built in my childhood home of Philadelphia. I remember a big sign up by the old baseball park, Bud, with 2 Ds.
Yeah.
So our authorization allows you to go put the bid in place and execute a contract, is that?
Right.
So-
And we will obviously keep the board very well
Okay.
informed on these as we progress. And again, you know, Dallas needs to sort of decide what their contest or process will be associated with this. And again, at this point in time, we're submitting an expression of interest and just want to have the authority to be able to follow up in that in a timely way.
Okay. Okay.
Yes, sir.
Is there a motion then to approve Resolution 16-05-35?
So moved. Second.
Your motion and a second. Any further discussion? All right, all those in favor of the motion to approve Resolution 16-05-35 signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstentions? Hearing none, that motion is approved. And that's the last thing on our business agenda. Is there anything else to come before the board?
No, sir.
Is there anything from the board? All right, before I adjourn a meeting, I'm going to say thank you again to Director Martin for being with us, and hope to see you back sometime, all right? With that, I'm going to adjourn our business meeting and take a 10-minute break before we come back for the briefings, okay?
And that will be next door.
That'll be next door, all right. Thank you very much.
been reconfirmed to their seats by the Oregon State Senate as of this morning. So no escape from TriMet is what I mean. And so with that, let me just sort of move on to the general topics that we have. One is that, as you know, and probably have seen at some point in time, we started an effort that really has paid off in terms of regional investment, something called pedestrian network analysis some time ago, which was really a study of where we have inadequate pedestrian infrastructure in the region, where that intersects with the transit system, and where improvements were needed and should be programmed by particularly local jurisdictions. We actually applied for a grant and received one to do something similar with the bike system. And so we have a bike plan that is under development. And as reported, I think, to you last week, we've also had a number of public conversations and meetings about this, and also an advisory group helping us develop the bike plan. And here, Jeff Owen, who's our active transportation planner, is here to bring you just an update on this document, which is pretty well developed at this point. So, Jeff, take it away, please.
Great, thank you very much. As Neil mentioned, the interest here is to really provide a complementary plan for what's in place on the pedestrian side. The images here on the screen are just some of the things that our customers and our riders, and even those around the region who don't ride our system, think of when they think of bikes and TriMet. Loading bikes on vehicles, accessing stations, riding on bike lanes and bikeways to get to our services. And then even in the bottom right, an image of what's coming around the corner from our partners at the City of Portland with a public bike sharing system coming online soon. So all of these things kind of all together are included in this bike plan under development. All of this information is currently and will be housed at our simple website URLs, /walk for the pedestrian side and /bike for the bike access side. As we just mentioned, this is a complementary plan in development that's wrapping up. So we are getting close. This plan is funded through a statewide grant. So this is ODOT as the funder. It's been just about a year. We're coming up on a year through the funding cycle. And this has been guided by a stakeholder advisory committee, very similar to the pedestrian plan we have in place. That's really important because, of course, we can't do this work alone. We're working with our jurisdictional partners, the counties and cities and ODOT, to help us improve conditions of getting customers to our stations and bus stops on bikeways. We've done quite a lot already. We've completed existing conditions analysis to know what's out there all around the region. We've gone to the public to ask their opinions on what they see, what they experience, what they'd like to see in the future. We've just completed the second round of open houses earlier this month. And that also included an interactive online component, so it was not just a traditional show up during this time frame, but also stay at home and open up the website and leave us a note on our website to provide your comments. One part of this plan has also been to study peer agencies around the country. So we're not just looking internally, but we're also looking at our peer agencies around the country for how do our practices and our trends compare. So that's been a really helpful exercise that's included 10 to 12 agencies around the country. So we've just finished a few open houses in early May. We are currently still taking feedback, so we're getting lots of feedback, as you can imagine. The public cares quite a bit, both riders who already use their bike to connect to transit, as well as people who don't, but who are impacted by, say, someone on board with a bike. So we're getting comments, all of the above, that are helping us shape the plan. And we will finalize the plan based on all this comment in June and basically be finished by the end of June. So just a quick snapshot of some of the public comments and what we've done with the public. We've had hundreds of comments through both showing up in person and online at interactive open houses. We've held these at different locations around the region, so it's not just one geography that's represented, but we've tried to spread them around the region. So we've had good attendance. One of the types of things we've asked them to do in person is, place a pin on the board, on the map, and help leave comments. Where do you see something that's positive, that we're doing well? And you'd like to say, yes, more of this, please. A red pin might be somewhere where they've had a problem connecting, and so they want to let us know this location on the map, take a closer look and see what you can do to improve access here. A snapshot of the online portion, where every dot here on the screen is a right click. Someone would leave a comment based on that actual geography of where that occurs. So they can zoom in and get down to the street level, drop the pin on just the right spot, and leave a comment for us there. So just the key themes that emerged from that. There's no silver bullet. This is a pretty complex environment of combining bikes with transit. A lot of our riders are willing and like to park their bikes on one end of the trip, which really frees up the vehicles to do everything else on board a little smoother. Other customers really want to take their bikes with them the whole way on the train. With things like bike share coming online soon, we're really hoping that's going to be very helpful to convince a lot of folks to go ahead and try bike parking on one end, board the train or the bus without their bike, and then use something different like bike share or another bus route on the other end. So we think that bike share is really promising and complementary for what we do. Folding bikes are popular, but only in some circles. So this allows us as an agency to let more people bring on a bike if it can be folded up and treated as luggage. However, not everyone, of course, wants to buy something new and have that as part of their solution. So interest in folding bikes is there, but it's a little bit slow. There's a lot of public interest in evaluating if we can do more capacity on the front of a bus. Some agencies do a 3-position bike rack, so we're evaluating that to see if it'll work for us. A lot of interest in bike share, and there's a lot of public understanding of how, if you ride Max during peak hour, it's very busy, and the public understands that. We do receive some comments about different ways they think that we should consider evaluating that. So we're taking a look at those we can, but we know the system is really busy. So one highlight to mention that along with all the external public outreach, we wanted to make sure all of our internal stakeholders have a chance to give input as well. I work, of course, in one department, but also throughout the agency with a lot of other divisions and departments. So a lot of these issues are pretty well known to me. However, we wanted to make sure and give the consultant team helping us on this project the chance to interview both key administrative staff in executive leadership positions, directors and managers, the chance to give feedback from what they've seen through their roles. We've also gone to all 3 bus garages and done anonymous interviews with bus operators, 10 per garage, to help make sure that we understand what's happening on the street, what the operators see through the windshield, how they interact with customers, and what they see to raise to our attention. So there's a lot of interest, but there's also a lot of concern about any changes relative to capacity and procedures. There was a lot of general interest in learning from peer agencies to make sure we know what's going on around the country. There's a lot of interest in clarifying our existing rules so that customers really know what's expected, as well as our operators, of course, know how things are from the customer side of them. And a lot of that we can do through education. So this is a really quick analysis, snapshot of kind of what we did on the data side, and then we'll run through the 6 kind of buckets of recommendations, and that'll be it. So what we did on the data side was to take a thorough look at all the existing stop and station information we have. 4 criteria, essential destinations, things like schools, hospitals, et cetera. The density of the transit network. So in areas with a lower density, it's really important to make that connection with the bike. Building on all of our equity work to date, and also looking at ridership. So we combined all that data with a qualitative analysis as well, which is the public feedback and a lot of other things to make sure we were combining both of those elements. So this gets us to focus areas around the region to look at. And both that's for accessing stations and stops, as well as bike parking at stations and stops. So we analyzed every transit stop in the region, and that got us to the image on the screen, which are some focus areas to really focus in on and guide our interests and our time and energy in working with our partners. There's pretty good spread throughout the region, but we're still taking some public feedback on these recommendations. So this graphic's pretty hard to see on your screen. However, we'll step through the 6 areas of recommendations. So it's everything from how the bus stops are designed, to how bikes are treated on board and how you access the stations. So area number one is promoting a culture of safety and integration related to all the interactions between buses and bikes. So recommendations include things such as expanding tools and education, developing positive messaging and others. The plan itself includes numerous recommendations in each of these 6 categories. These are just a few snapshots. Area 2 is bike parking at stations and stops. The graphic here is just one of, say, 10 renderings that were created to kind of show a concept of what we can do to improve bike parking at those stations, to illustrate proper locking techniques, to think about sponsorships. Some agencies do sponsorships of bike parking, and really target areas with underutilized parking that we've already built. Area number 3, how does TriMet interact with bike share coming online? There's a lot of recommendations geared towards the physical location so that customers can make those complementary modes. There's also ideas such as, think about how we're going to market to those customers. Are there sponsorship opportunities that TriMet should consider? Is there a way that we can coordinate our future Hop Fast Pass with bike share payment? So giving us lots of recommendations to think about that coordination in the future. Area number 4, of course, accessing. If customers can't get to us, that's a big problem. So this really speaks to TriMet's current and ongoing work of working with our partner jurisdictions to make sure that improvements to bikeways are prioritized that go to transit stations. It also includes a few recommendations for us to make sure that our internal design criteria and other elements are updated and include best practices. Area number 5 is onboard storage, to evaluate whether we can do a 3-position bike rack for bus, to clarify existing policies for MAX. When it gets really busy, we need to make sure it's clear for the public to understand what the rules are. And is there a way that we can evaluate something like a real-time app on a phone that would help customers know if space is available? There's currently one agency doing a pilot to try to study that. So it's not yet completely figured out, but it's on our list of future considerations. And finally, area number 6, to really increase monitoring our success, to make sure we are doing counts and summaries and improving our data and our understanding of how customers are accessing the system. Some agencies around the country do a little bit more regarding pass-ups. So if there's already 2 bikes on the front of the bus and that customer waiting at the stop is unable to put their bike on and get on the bus, currently we don't have a great understanding of how often that happens. So this recommendation is to kind of increase that awareness. So there's a number of areas there for us to think about better monitoring in the future. So just a reminder of next steps. We just completed the last round of open houses in person around the region. We still have our draft plan available on the website through the end of May. We're taking public feedback. We're going to finalize that in June, next month, and basically be finished by July. So shortly after that, we will prioritize and try to work towards lots of these implementation recommendations. So that was a very quick overview. Happy to take any questions if you have any. Yes, it is a very short time frame, mostly fed by the funding source of the grant, is a 1-year time frame. Yeah.
Just a question about the onboard storage. Number 1, this is probably a stupid question, but is there, can we use we have the bikes on the front, could we have bikes on the back also? Is that a safety concern?
There are 1 or 2 systems that do bike racks on the back of buses. Historically, we have not really evaluated that because it's obviously a pretty decent safety concern to think about how customers would load and unload and be able to keep an eye on what's happening so far behind the bus, not to mention the operator role as well of having to worry about something hanging off the back of the bus. So that's something that we've only scratched the surface a little bit in evaluating. We haven't spent a ton of time on that, to be honest. It's not something widespread that occurs in transit. There's just 1 or 2 agencies who have done that.
Have you discovered any other kind of innovative type storage things for buses? I don't know if there are any options, but
The most innovation with onboard storage for buses is around longer articulated vehicles that have more space inside. Something that, of course, we may use in future projects. So part of the plan does recommend, and we are already looking at the best practices around the country and others of storage inside longer articulated vehicles. But for standard size buses, it's really just the front rack and then folding bikes inside. There also are one or two agencies that look at giving operators some discretion. If, say, it's, for example, the last bus of the night and it's not very full, is there a way the operator can have discretion to allow someone to bring the bike inside? So that's done in a few places that we can also evaluate that as well to see if that meets our needs.
How about on time? If you've got a person getting their bike on and off the front of a bus, that could be a lot of minutes.
Yeah, there is some concern around that for sure. If there's a whole lot of activity occurring in front of the bus, obviously that's going to increase the dwell time at the stop. However, also there's ways through education that we can really help customers know how to do that quickly and efficiently. Quite honestly, at busy stations and stops, the front activity on the bus, on and off, loading bikes occurs while people are boarding and paying fares. But yes, at stops where there's less on and off activity, one or two bikes being loaded on the front and unloaded could have dwell impact. So there is that concern. But hopefully we can accomplish a lot of that through efficient loading, through education and outreach, which we do some already, and we can increase that in the future.
Okay, no other questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jeff, thank you.
Okay.
Wanted to, while we're talking about plans, bring you up to date on one of the plan, and I'd like to ask Alan Lado and Hannah Ritchie to come up if they could. This is the STFAC coordinated plan, and you recall that at various points in time the board is asked to approve allocations of STFAC funds to various nonprofit or other service providers throughout the region as part of our coordinated, and that follows from a coordinated transportation plan, which we are in the midst of updating right now. And again, this is a federal requirement because these do help guide the allocation of federal funds as well as state funds that have augmented the federals. So with that, I'll turn it over to Alan and Hannah.
Great.
Presentation.
Thanks, Neil. Dr. Bethel, members of the board. Just to give a little context, in the last census, about 1 in 5 Americans identified themselves as disabled in some way, and more than half of them identified themselves as severely disabled. Now, many of them can ride our fixed route service and do. In fact, we have something like 10 million boardings by seniors and or people with disabilities on our fixed route service each year. But we have a number of people in the region who can't travel that way. And there's a network of services, first and foremost, but not only, our own paratransit Lyft service that provide for mobility for those folks who otherwise would be trapped in their homes and unable to participate in a kind of regular life. And so one of the most important things that kind of comes out of that is a tremendous need, a need that is hard to keep up with, and an absolutely critical need to coordinate the efforts across the different providers and the different people who are paying, the different groups that are paying attention to that need. So we have something like 1 million boardings on our Lyft services each year. That's about 1% of our total ridership, but at a much higher cost per ride. And so being coordinated, being innovative is extremely important. And this is the mechanism through which the region does that. I'll ask Hannah to talk through our process in just a moment, but you'll hear that it's TriMet's role not only for our own district, but our role through the federal process and through the state process to distribute funds and manage those funds in a smart way that gives us some responsibility for the entire 3-county region, not just our own district. And so what you'll see in this is an effort to continue and improve the coordination between the different efforts between our services, our Lyft that's carrying 1 million people, the fixed route that are carrying 10 million, Ride Connection that's carrying 500,000 and their other partners, and the small transit agencies around the region like a Wilsonville or a Sandy that are carrying tens of thousands, but people who literally would have no other means of traveling. So with that, I'd ask Hannah to talk a little bit about its acronym soup here, the CTP that is advised by the STFAC. And then we'll talk some about the actions that are proposed in the next steps.
Thank you. Okay, so good morning and thank you. I'll talk a little bit about how we are the program administrator for the 5310 and STF funds for the region. Section 5310 is a federal FTA fund for transportation services for seniors and persons with disabilities. And STF is a special transportation fund provided by the state for very similar transportation services. And so we are the not only designated recipient by the federal government, but the STF agency is designated by the state. So in this role, we do receive these funds and distribute them through to different providers within the region, both within our district and outside of our district, those rural transit providers connecting to our system. And so in this role, we not only coordinate it with the STF Advisory Committee to prioritize the projects that are funded, but we are also required to do this coordinated transportation plan for seniors and persons with disabilities. So within the plan, we look at all the different types of transportation services that are provided in the region, like I said, both within our district and without and outside of our district. So we coordinate not only Lyft paratransit services and include a snapshot of what's on our fixed route system, but we also include the types of services that are provided by Ride Connection and our other rural providers. Sandy can be South Clackamas Transit District, which is Molalla, Wilsonville. So I have a nice little graphic here that shows just what these services look like. We have paratransit services, we have mobility management services, deviated fixed route services provided throughout the region and by different providers. So in regards to the plan, we are required to update this about every 4 years. That's required by the state and by the federal government. Currently, our plan is from 2012, and it's hosted on our website on the TriMet STFAC page. So it's time to update it. We've been in the process of updating this for the last few months since January. We've had well, I think, so you're going to go into more about our process, but we have been going through this for several months now, and we have been working with our STFAC and with the state to coordinate this process, including our various rural providers. Within the STFAC, we do have representation from many different seniors and persons with disabilities living within our district and outside of our district, including the different providers within our region and CAT committee members as well. So there's a lot of work that's gone on in that area, and Alan's going to speak a little bit more about that.
So just to cap off the conversation about the hardworking advisory committee, we've made them sit through 6 3-hour-long meetings to be able to do what is a pretty comprehensive update to this plan. It needs to be updated every 4 years, but things have changed enough in the past 4 years, and the picture now compared to where it was 4 years ago. The last time it was all about how do we cut as little as possible and save as much service as possible because we were still in the recession. Now this is more about how do we be smart about moving forward and make good investments so that each year or each 2-year cycle, when the group is when we're asking them to make recommendations to the board about how these funds are distributed, we make them with a solid policy basis and a good process and a good way of prioritizing the services. So the advisory committee, you can see a few shots from their work. We've been having them go through existing conditions, identifying needs, giving us some feedback about how the application process and the prioritization process should work, because we've been reinventing that. Along with the coordinated transportation plan, which we'll bring to you next month, we will also bring a request to update or endorse the membership of the STFAC, because since the last time you saw us in February, I think it was, we've done some additional recruiting with an eye towards equity and diversity on the committee, and have successfully recruited several additional members. So we want to make sure we get their contributions, which they're already started making, formally recognized. So just quickly about the plan itself. It goes through the typical sort of what's there now, what are the needs, and what should we think about doing in the next 4 years. And so the map here is just an illustration of, this doesn't clearly delineate the TriMet district, but definitely there are services outside. Some of the services that Hannah mentioned, such as SMART, South Clackamas, are providing access to folks in and out of the district and getting into the communities. It also talks about sort of the needs and the expectations, and that's what this service guidelines, it's just a snapshot. But when we started this process, and historically, we've made sure that it understands that there are often aspirations for more service than is provided now. For example, there are some places where, yes, I can get paratransit service if I'm eligible for it, but I can only get it during kind of regular business hours on weekdays. And hey, I need to get to the grocery store on Saturday or something like that. And so there are specific aspirational service levels that are identified that expand the service somewhat. It's purposefully not financially constrained, so that when there are conversations in the future with the state and other sources about the ability to perhaps improve service, it's more clear what the needs actually are. The two red circles on what you're looking at really focus in on the needs within our district. So you can see there's interest both in what's happening within the district, where frankly close to 90% of the population lives, and outside the district, where there's something more like 10%, but especially in the rural communities, the need is very high. We did a needs assessment that included a number of issues, both in terms of doing sort of focus group conversations with providers and service receivers throughout the region, as well as demographics and other analysis. This is just a snapshot of people 65 years or older, or who identify themselves as having disabilities, to give a sense of what the densities are throughout the region. So there are a number of priorities and actions in the plan, in the proposed plan. I wanted to give you a highlight of some of the key ones. The first is this committee meets each time money needs to be distributed, but in the last few years they haven't met otherwise. And the first recommendation is to create a subcommittee that actually keeps some focus in on these actions, so that over the next 4 years there is some real forward progress that's measured and proactive. I already mentioned the tracking the performance, making sure that we're really grounded in measurements and ensuring that we're doing things that are efficient and effective. And then maintaining and making sure that what's out there now can continue to serve the people who rely on it. And then looking forward, as I mentioned, sort of that everybody on the STFAC recognizes the need for cost-effective service, the need to provide this very important service, but to do so in a coordinated way that really encourages and emphasizes the most cost-effective way to serve the most number of people. And so there are a number of actions in here that look at encouraging the use of fixed route service. There are folks who, with a little bit of training, can switch from Lyft to fixed route, and that dramatically 10 times reduces their cost per ride to TriMet and our ability to serve more people with the same funds. Managing demand for ADA service to make sure that those people who really need it will have it available when they need it. Again, coordinating and updating information about what kinds of services there are. I had a great conversation with a couple of our folks who work in the mobility office recently about how occasionally there are people who come into the office for a Lyft assessment who end up in tears because they didn't realize the range of different services that were available to them and are really set free from what they feel like is a locked-in experience. Strong coordination and collaboration, integration with the Hop Fast Pass, and seeking additional funding opportunities in the future with this better understanding of what the needs really are. Quickly on the finance, the two main sources for these efforts are the federal 5310 and the state STF. Both of which are sorely needed and well used. TriMet receives funds from both of those, and which goes into both provision of Lyft service and replacement and maintenance of Lyft vehicles. Other services get either financial funding for service provision or for replacement of vehicles and maintenance as well. And as I said, we consciously wanted to identify some of the gaps so that we can be more informed when there are opportunities, either in Salem or otherwise, to identify the very real additional needs. Our next steps, then, briefly, we'd be coming back to you in June with the full recommended, what we hope will be a full recommended plan. What we expect will be the last meeting of the committee will be next week, and we will be bringing them the final, what we think is the final version based on all of the input that they've had so far. And a request to update that plan as well as endorse the committee members.
So if you would like to see a copy of the draft plan, it is provided on the website on our TriMet STF page. And then once it's finalized and approved by you all, we will have the final hosted on that same webpage, available to you and the public. Thanks.
Any questions? Director Prosser?
Yeah, can you remind me what the source of the STF?
Yeah, maybe Hannah can remind me. It's a variety of state sources.
So the state special transportation fund is revenue from cigarette tax and voter ID card registration.
Voter registration.
So voter ID cards, like a driver's license for people who don't drive, so it's again, that is not dedicated to the highway system the way a driver's license revenue is, given the constitutional limitation.
Okay.
So they have to kind of cobble it together, given the fact there's not a natural source otherwise.
It's an interesting question, just to elaborate a tad more. One of the reasons Board President Warner is not here, he's down testifying in front of a special transportation legislative task force this afternoon in Salem, and this follows up from the governor's vision panel that he participated on. And it's the needs that I think you heard Alan and Hannah relate that are driving a lot of conversation, frankly, statewide, about the need for more support for public transit. And it really is statewide. It's in Eastern Oregon, Southern Oregon, the coast, the Willamette Valley, that these needs are all becoming very apparent to local communities. And it's beginning to drive a much more, hopefully, robust, and that's the hope, of course, much more robust state participation, maybe more than just the cobbled together nickels and dimes that we see that come together for the STFAC process now.
And I had one other question. On slide 12, this map looks like there's some islands that I assume are outside the planning area. but it looks like there are potential users of these services within those islands.
There are some generalized services provided by the counties that are either contracted or directly provided. And so there is some level of service even outside the sort of main corridors there. But as I was mentioning in the aspirational service levels, it's often relatively infrequent or has relatively short spans during the day or during the week. So there's clearly there are very few places where people literally can't travel at all, but there's clearly need for additional mobility for them.
Okay, and so does this plan create a roadmap to solving that issue?
What it does is identify the issue more clearly, identify not the exact numbers needed, but at least the places where it's needed and the kinds of gap between what's there now and what could be.
Okay.
And then to the extent that we or anybody else is able to increase the funding available, then anything that's in the plan is eligible for that STF or 5310 funding.
Okay.
No other questions? That's it? Well, we bring the briefing meeting to a close. Thank you all for
Thank
your
you all very
presence
much.
and your attendance today. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
And Shelley, it was good
Thank you.
working with you and enjoy, and we.
I'm so sad. I really am. I think Bruce was